Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. The box slipped from my hands when the phone buzzed again. I almost let it fall on my foot, then caught it badly. My heart was already racing, and I had no idea why. I am Maya, 26, and that was the morning everything tilted. I wedged the box against my hip and checked the screen. 3 missed calls from Mom, all in less than 10 minutes. The last text sat under her name in capital letters. "Call me now, emergency, answer your phone." For a second I convinced myself it was drama. She used that word for traffic, late bills, bad hair days. I set the box in the trunk and tried to breathe slowly. Today was supposed to be my clean break, my one shot. The phone started vibrating again before I even closed the trunk. Her contact photo filled the screen and my thumb hovered there. If I picked up, I knew the day might vanish. If I ignored it, I knew I would burn about it. I answered on the last ring, already braced for guilt. All I heard at first was breathing, harsh and shaky. Then my name came out of her like a warning. "Maya, where are you? Something happened to your father." My stomach dropped in that stupid, sudden roller coaster way. I asked what happened and my voice came out thin. She said he collapsed in the driveway and scared the neighbors. He was at the hospital now, and they did not know. I opened the driver's side door and sat down hard. The steering wheel felt sticky under my hands, like it belonged to someone else. I asked if he was awake, if he was talking, if she called anyone else. She said he looked gray and she could not stop shaking. I checked the time on the dashboard and did the math. Eli was supposed to meet me downtown in 40 minutes. Courthouse first, then Keys, then a different life in a different place. My brain tried to hold both timelines at once and failed miserably. Mom kept talking, words tumbling over each other like loose change. No one else was picking up, your brother was out of state. She could not drive, she could not be alone, she could not do this. Her voice cracked on that last part and it hit something old. I told her to slow down and asked again if he was stable. She repeated the word emergency like it was proof all by itself. I asked what the doctor said and she went quiet a moment. Then she said if I loved my father I would come. That line landed sharper than anything about hospitals or tests. Because she knew exactly where I was supposed to be going. We had not talked about it, but she knew enough. She knew my car was packed and my engine was already warm. I looked at the mirror and saw the pile in the back. Suitcase, backpack, a rolled blanket, my entire plan crammed together. Everything I owned that mattered was ready to cross a state line. I had been proud of that mess 15 minutes earlier. My thumb hovered over the navigation app, still pinned downtown. One route took me toward Eli and the clerk and a sign page. The other spun me around toward the hospital and my parents' world. Every choice I ever avoided felt like it was standing there. Mom asked again if I was on my way yet. Her breathing turned choppy and loud right into my ear. She said she did not understand how I could even hesitate. Then she asked if this new life meant more than my father. I wish I could say I handled that moment calmly. I did not. My brain flashed through worst-case images so fast I felt dizzy. In all of them I was the bad guy who stayed away. I told her I would come and heard my own voice crack. Relief flooded her side of the line so fast it almost hurt. She whispered thank you like I had just pulled him from danger myself. I watched my navigation redraw the route while my chest tightened. We hung up and the car went silent except for the engine. I sat there for 3 long breaths that felt like accusations. Then I opened my messages and clicked on Eli's name. I typed and erased 3 different explanations before sending anything. Emergency with my dad, I am being dragged to the hospital. I wrote that I would be late, maybe very late, but I did not cancel. I stared at the little sending bar like it could change fate. The message went through and the empty space under it felt heavy. I shifted into drive and pulled away from the curb too fast. Every red light on the way out of the neighborhood felt hostile. My hands kept slipping on the wheel because I would not stop wiping them. I kept glancing at the packed back seat like it might vanish. My phone buzzed again at the next stop sign. Eli. He asked if I was okay and if I wanted him there. The words sat on my screen while another car honked behind me. I told him it sounded serious and I had to go. I said I was sorry, that I would explain everything later. My thumb hovered over the word later for a ridiculous long moment. Even then, some part of me knew that word was a lie. On the main road, the hospital exit and the downtown exit split. The sign showed up faster than I was ready for it. My blinker clicked right toward the hospital like it decided before me. I remember thinking, this is the moment I will hate forever. Traffic thickened as I merged and my chest started to burn. I kept picturing Eli waiting near the courthouse steps with my folder. I could see him checking his watch, then his phone, then the door. None of that stopped my car from moving farther away. Another text came in, short and careful, asking if I wanted to reschedule. I did not answer because any reply felt like choosing out loud. I told myself I needed both hands on the wheel and focus. Really, I just could not write the words that would end it. The hospital exit approached, and my navigation chirped some cheerful reminder. I cut across a lane harder than I should have and drew a horn. My pulse pounded in my neck and temples like someone knocking. I kept thinking, if he dies and I was not there, I will never come back from that. Hours later, I would stand in a bright room and see him upright. I would realize no one had actually said the word dying on the phone. I would replay this drive so many times it felt like punishment. But right then, I only knew one thing for sure. I was not driving toward my own life anymore. I was racing toward theirs and shutting the door on mine without saying it out loud. I pulled into the first open space and stopped too hard. The seat belt dug into my chest and I tasted metal. For a second, I just gripped the wheel like it could answer. Then I yanked the keys out and ran toward the entrance. Inside, the noise hit me in one messy wave. Voices, rolling carts, some loudspeaker calling names I did not catch. I walked straight to the desk and dropped my purse on the counter. Words tumbled out before I even saw the nurse's face. I gave her his full name and my throat tightened. My voice came out higher than usual, and I hated that. She checked the screen, tapped a few times, then looked calm. That calmness almost made me more nervous than her words. "He's an observation," she said, pointing down a hallway. Nothing in her tone matched the panic from the phone. She told me to follow the signs and pushed a sticker over. I slapped it on my shirt without reading it and walked. Every doorway I passed had a different kind of pain. Someone crying, someone pacing, someone scrolling their phone too fast. I kept pretending not to see any of them, just corners and turns. My focus shrank to the number on his room. I stopped outside his door and my hand would not move. You know that split second when you want to both run and bolt? That was me, frozen in the narrow hallway, breathing too shallow. If he was unconscious, I would have to see it. I pushed the door with my elbow and stepped inside. He was upright, feet dangling off the edge of the bed. A monitor clicked in steady beats beside him, nothing dramatic. He looked tired, but he was arguing with a nurse about sports. My knees almost went out from under me because anger hit first. Not relief, not gratitude, not anything noble, just sharp irritation. I had ripped my day apart for this scene. Then guilt crashed right behind it and I wanted to sink. He saw me and lifted his hand like nothing serious happened. "There she is," he called like I had been gone an hour. The nurse glanced at me and gave a quick nod toward the door. I stepped closer and wrapped my arms around him anyway. His hospital gown crinkled and he felt annoyingly solid. He told me it was just a faint spell and shrugged. Apparently he blacked out for a moment and scared everyone. I pulled back and studied his face for any real danger. A doctor walked in then, flipping through a chart with one hand. He gave me a quick once-over and asked if I was family. We went through the basics, questions, answers, my dad making jokes. The doctor's voice stayed level in a way that told me plenty. "His tests look fine so far," he said, eyes on the page. They wanted to keep him a few hours, maybe overnight, just to watch. It sounded more like routine than life or death. Something tight inside me loosened, then twisted in a different way. Because now the choice looked different and I knew it. This was not the nightmare image from the drive. This was a scare with a controlled script and professionals nearby. My presence suddenly felt less vital and more symbolic. Mom appeared in the doorway with her purse clutched to her side. Her eyes were red, her mascara smudged, her shoulders pulled tight. She walked straight to him and touched his cheek like glass. Then she turned on me with that wet, accusing stare. "See what happens when you are not around," she said. My mouth opened, then closed, because anything I answered felt dangerous. She gripped my wrist and squeezed like she could anchor me there. In that grip, I could feel every expectation I had tried to dodge. The doctor went over the plan again, and she kept interrupting. "What if he said out again? What if the monitor missed something?" He reassured her in the same calm tone, like he had done this daily. She only calmed once he said the word admit. When he left, the room shrank around the three of us. Dad tried to lighten the mood with some weak joke about free food. Mom brushed his hair back and scolded him for scaring her stiff. Then her gaze slid to me and stuck there like glue. "Thank God you dropped everything and came," she said. She had no idea how literal that sentence was. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket and nearly jumped. That tiny buzz reminded me there was another life waiting. I pulled it out under the edge of the bed rail. One new message from Eli blinked on the screen. "Are you okay? What is happening? Do you still want me downtown?" Every word looked both kind and loaded at the same time. I texted back with my thumbs shaking over the keyboard. He had a spell. They are keeping him here to be safe. I wrote that I was at the hospital and trying to figure things out. I did not mention the time we were supposed to sign anything. He answered almost right away, and that hurt in its own way. "If things are stable, can you still get here later?" He added that we could push the meeting if I needed space. He called me honey, which somehow made it worse. I stared at those lines while Dad flipped channels with the remote. Mom watched his hand like it might slip at any moment. I was the only one aware of the digital countdown in my pocket. Every minute here meant another step away from that other plan. My thumbs hovered again, and I chose the safest half-truth. "They are keeping him for observation. I cannot leave right now." I typed that I was sorry and would call when things settled. I hit send and hated myself for how vague it sounded. The sound of the outgoing message caught Mom's attention. Her head snapped toward my hands like a reflex. "Who are you talking to?" she asked, voice too sharp for a hospital. I tilted the screen away, and my heart kicked against my ribs. "Just letting people know he is okay," I answered. That should have been harmless, but her eyes narrowed anyway. She wiped under one eyelid with her thumb, then held out her palm. "Let me see," she said, like it was the most normal request. I hesitated, and that was my mistake. Hesitation around her always worked like an alarm. She reached forward and plucked the phone from my grip. Her gaze dropped to the display, and I watched her mouth harden. Eli's name glowed in the thread, impossible to miss. She scrolled once, just enough to catch his last question. Her jaw tightened, and she handed the device back with 2 fingers. "You really think today is about you?" she asked quietly. The way she said "you" felt heavier than any shout. Dad glanced over, picking up on the tone, not the content. He tried to joke again, about everyone ganging up on him instead. Mom ignored him and locked those eyes on me. "You are not running off while your father lies here," she said. The words came slow, each one placed like a brick. There was no request in that sentence, only a verdict. I felt my cheeks heat up like I had been caught stealing. I looked down at the phone and opened a new reply. Her presence hovered over my shoulder like a second screen. I typed, then erased, then typed again until my hands hurt. Finally I wrote, "I cannot make it today, I am staying here." I added, "I am really sorry," and stared at that little apology. It looked flimsy on the bright display, but it was all I had. I sent it while Mom watched my face instead of my hands. Eli's response took longer this time, and that gap said plenty. When his answer came in, it was shorter than before. "Okay, I understand, we can talk later." No hearts, no jokes, no future tense, just those clipped lines. I felt something thin inside me start to tear. Mom relaxed a fraction once she saw me slip the phone away. She turned back to my father and fussed with his blanket. "See, we are together, that is what matters," she murmured. That last word scraped against the part of me that wanted out. The doctor returned with paperwork and a practiced smile. He reminded us that the tests were reassuring and the stay was precaution. He asked if we had questions, and Mom launched into a dozen what-ifs. I leaned against the wall and watched the clock above his head. Every sweep of the second hand landed like a small accusation. I could almost see the courthouse doors closing in my mind. I saw Eli checking his watch, then putting his away. Standing there, I pretended the only crisis in that room wore a gown. I ripped the hospital band off my wrist as I unlocked the front door. It snapped harder than I expected and stung my skin. The broken strip dropped on the welcome mat and stayed there. For a second, I just stared at it like it could decide for me. I stepped inside and almost tripped over my own suitcase. It sat where I had left it that morning. Half closed, stubborn. My foot hit the side and the zipper nudged open a little more. The sight hit me harder than anything I heard in that hospital room. I reminded myself why I had come back to the house. Mom needed clothes, chargers, all the little things she forgot. Dad needed slippers and his glasses because he hated feeling helpless. That was the official mission, the reasonable cover story. My eyes kept sliding away from the bedroom and toward the driveway. Out there, my car still held the rest of my life in boxes. It felt absurd that both things could be true on the same street. Inside was crisis mode, outside was escape mode, and I stood between them. I stepped around the suitcase and headed for their room first. I yanked drawers open and threw things on the bed in fast piles. T-shirts, sweatpants, whatever my hand found without thinking too much. If I thought too long, I knew exactly where my brain would go. Their room smelled like their detergent, and that almost undid me. That scent meant Sunday calls and holiday dinners and 1,000 tiny obligations. It reminded me why I wanted out and why walking out felt dirty. My chest went tight enough that I had to stop and breathe. I stuffed everything into a duffel and zipped it all the way. Doing something practical helped, at least for a minute or two. Then I turned toward my own room and the air shifted. Walking down that short hallway felt like walking into an argument. My door was still half open from the last frantic packing rush. I pushed it with my shoulder and the suitcase brushed my ankle. The top had fallen back enough to show a corner of an envelope. It peeked out like it wanted my attention more than anything else. I tried to ignore it and reached for my overnight bag instead. I got as far as unzipping that before my hand turned back. You know that stupid impulse when you already know what hurts. You still poke it again just to be sure it is real. I pulled the envelope free and unfolded the pages inside. At the top, the company name stared back at me in bold print. Under that, the position title, the start date, the city 3 states away. The ink looked fresh even though I had memorized every line already. Reading it now felt completely different from when I first signed it. Back then, the salary and relocation bonus made me giddy and reckless. Now all I could see was the start date circled in blue pen. Today, the day I had just thrown away without saying the words. My hand shook enough that the paper rustled. I caught myself and flattened it on the bed with both palms. For a second I imagined folding it smaller, sliding it into my pocket. Walking out the front door and never coming back to this hallway. My phone buzzed on the mattress and broke that fantasy. I grabbed it, half expecting another update from the hospital. Instead, a calendar alert flashed across the screen with cheerful urgency. Appointment at county clerk's office, plus the address underneath in bold. I hit dismiss so fast I almost dropped the phone. That reminder should have been background music to a good day. Now it felt like a stranger rubbing it in. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall and watch it shatter. Instead, I shoved it under a pillow and went back to the suitcase. The envelope slid from my fingers and landed near a small cloth pouch. I stared at that pouch like it was ticking. Part of me hoped I had imagined what was inside it. I picked it up anyway and loosened the string with numb fingers. The ring slid into my palm, light and solid at the same time. Simple band, small stone, nothing dramatic, exactly right for us. Looking at it made my throat burn more than any hospital monitor. He had pressed it into my hand in his car one night. I hear his voice in my head even now, asking if I was sure. We did not do some grand kneel-down thing, just a quiet promise. We were supposed to make it official after the paperwork downtown. I set the ring on the folded job offer and lost my breath. Side by side, they looked like evidence of a life I invented. The kind of life where I got to choose where I slept at night. Not the one where a single phone call sent me speeding back home. The front door chimed and I flinched like someone caught me stealing. For a split second, I thought Mom had somehow come back early. My brain jumped to images of her finding the ring on my bed. I actually scooped it up and closed my fist around it. Silence followed the chime, just the house creaking the way it does. No footsteps, no voices, no one there to see me choking. It was probably just the wind or some glitch in the system. Still, I tucked the ring into my jeans pocket and left it there. My phone vibrated again, muffled by the pillow I had buried it under. This time it was an actual call, not some bright reminder. Unknown numbers, local area code, and a little wave of dread. I knew it was probably the onboarding team before. Yeah, I even answered. Hello, my voice sounded smaller than I wanted. Hi, this is HR from the office downtown, a woman replied. She asked if everything was okay because I had missed check-in. Her tone was polite but firm, like she had done this before. I walked in a slow circle beside my bed, toes digging into the rug. I told her there had been a medical scare in the family. Not a lie, but not the whole picture either, never the whole picture. I added that I was at the hospital and got pulled away. She went quiet for a beat and I heard keyboard clicks. Are you still planning to relocate this week? She asked. There it was, the question underneath all the other questions. My mouth opened and nothing believable came out for a few heartbeats. I managed, which was technically true. I said some things had shifted and I needed a little time. I promised I was committed, that I just needed to figure logistics. Even I could hear how shaky the word committed sounded. She explained that they had a schedule, that training started today. They had already rearranged a few things to bring me in on short notice. She asked if I could guarantee an arrival date before the end of the week. Guarantee felt like a heavy door slamming in my ear. I looked at the duffel full of my parents' clothes on the floor. I imagined Mom's voice if I told her I was leaving Friday. I pictured Dad shuffling around a hospital room without her there. Every version of myself in those scenes looked like a traitor. I cannot give you a firm date right now, I told her. The air between each word felt thick enough to chew. I added that I understood if they needed someone more available. I could almost feel the job slipping away as I spoke. She exhaled and her tone shifted from professional to resigned. They had backup candidates, she explained, people already in the area. They could not hold the position without a timeline from me. She thanked me for my honesty and used the phrase moving on. When the call ended, the room felt too quiet and too loud together. I sank onto the bed with the phone still in my hand. The offer letter stared up at me from the rumpled blanket. I wanted to tear it into strips and also frame it. I did not cry, which still surprises me when I think back. It was more like my chest hollowed out and left static. My thoughts slid around with nowhere to land. I remember only one clear sentence in my head. You chose without admitting you chose. Not for the last time either, but I did not know that yet. Back then, I told myself the job might still call again somehow. Denial can be weirdly creative when you're desperate. My screen lit up with a new message while I sat there. This time it was Eli, not some corporate unknown. How is your dad? Do you need anything from me? No mention of the missed appointment, not yet. I stared at that text longer than I had looked at the contract. He was offering help, not blame, which almost hurt more. Because I knew what I had just allowed to happen on that call. And I knew I had not warned him about any of it. I typed and erased answer after answer until my thumbs ached. Finally, I sent something small and controlled. He is stable, they are keeping him overnight, Mom is a wreck. I added I came home to grab stuff, going back soon. He responded with a simple, okay, I am here if you want me. No lecture, no pressure, just that steady line. I almost wrote, I lost the job, I panicked, I froze. Instead, I locked the screen and dropped the phone beside me. I got up fast before I talked myself into honesty. The duffel waited like a reminder that I still had a role. I hauled it toward the door, then stopped and turned back again. One more thing needed to be hidden before I went anywhere. I reached into my pocket and pulled the ring out. It lay in my palm, small and bright and completely out of place. I glanced around for a spot that felt secure and invisible. My eyes landed on the top drawer of my nightstand. I slid it open and pushed aside some old receipts and a charger. I set the ring box deep in the corner and closed the drawer. Not forever, I told myself, just until everything calms down. Some part of me already knew I was burying more than jewelry. I heard tires crunch in the driveway before I saw his car. I was in the kitchen rinsing a mug with one hand. The sound froze me harder than any doctor's update ever did. I knew exactly who it was and exactly what he expected. Mom glanced toward the window and wiped her hands on a towel. She checked the clock like she had been keeping quiet score. "Someone's here for you," she said like it was a test. My fingers slipped on the ceramic and almost dropped it in the sink. "Probably Eli," she added, pretending it was just casual information. The way she said his name made my shoulders pull up on their own. "He sure comes by a lot lately." She watched my face when she said lately, not the window. I set the mug down and dried my palms on my jeans. My phone buzzed on the table an instant later, predictable. Outside, his horn tapped once, not impatient, just a reminder. Every sound in that moment felt like a countdown I had started. "You coming out or should I knock?" That was his text, short and open like always. I stared at the screen long enough for Mom to notice. She raised one eyebrow and reached for a cutting board. "I have to go talk to him," I muttered. It came out more like asking permission than I wanted. "Go," she answered, already turning back to her tasks. Then she added, "Don't forget your dad needs help upstairs later." That last line landed with more weight than any order. Because upstairs, he was resting after his night in the hospital. He had been discharged with pills and a brochure and strict instructions. Those instructions hung over every decision in that house now. I slid my phone into my pocket and headed to the front door. My chest tightened with each step like I walked toward a ledge. I knew what Eli had in his trunk even before I saw it. We had packed it together the week before, laughing in his driveway. I opened the door and the air hit my face like a slap. He was already walking toward the porch, keys hooked on one finger. Behind him, his back seat and trunk were full of labeled boxes. For a second, it looked like the world I had almost earned. "There you are," he said, giving me that half-tired smile. He stopped just short of the steps and studied my expression. "I was starting to think you fell asleep holding your phone." I forced something close to a smile and gripped the railing. "You drove all the way over here with that?" I asked. I nodded toward the loaded car because there was no hiding it. He followed my gaze and shrugged one shoulder like it was nothing. "Thought we were still doing this," he replied, still careful. By this, he meant everything we had mapped out. Not just moving boxes, not just a new mailing address. He meant the job that no longer existed and the ring in my drawer. I felt my stomach knot so hard, I thought I might double over. "Can we talk inside the car?" he asked, jerking his head toward it. He did not look at the house when he suggested that. He had learned over time that walls in this place had ears. Honestly, he was not wrong about that. I glanced back through the open door and saw Mom watching. She stood just far enough inside to pretend she was not spying. Her hands were busy, but her eyes were locked on us. It was the kind of stare that said, "Remember whose house this is." "I'll be right out front," I called over my shoulder. She hummed as if she had not been listening to every word. I stepped outside and pulled the door shut until it clicked. That small sound felt too final for such a thin piece of wood. We walked to his car in silence, side by side. He unlocked it and motioned toward the passenger seat. I slid in, my knees brushing against a stack of folded blankets. The interior smelled faintly like fast food and cheap air freshener. When he climbed in, he did not start the engine. He just rested his hands on the steering wheel and exhaled slowly. So he began, eyes still fixed on the dashboard. "How bad is it with your dad?" I closed my eyes for one beat and opened them again. "He's home," I answered, picking my words like stepping stones. "They want him to take it slow, there's follow-up, he gets tired easily." All of that was accurate, none of it was the real problem. That sounds rough, he said, drumming his fingers once. I'm glad he's not in intensive care or something worse. He paused, then looked at me straight on. Does this change everything we talked about? That question sat between us, and I could almost see it. I swallowed and stared at the glove compartment instead of his face. I don't know yet, I lied, and we both heard it. I knew plenty, I just did not want to say it out loud. He waited, giving me room to fill the silence. I did what I usually do when cornered. I started talking around the issue instead of through it. Mom is freaking out, he can't be downstairs alone, there's a lot. That's family stuff, he cut in, not unkind, just direct. I get that, I really do, I've been trying. He gestured toward the boxes behind us, then toward the street. But is this still happening, you and me leaving? I felt heat climb up my neck like I had been caught cheating. Not on him, but on someone, maybe on myself. I lost the position, I blurted before I could soften it. The words hit the air and hung there, heavy and ugly. His jaw clenched once, then relaxed like he forced it. How, he asked, voice lower now, almost flat. No anger, just a quiet kind of disappointment that burned worse. I wished he would yell instead, honestly. They called when I was here, I said, fingers twisting in my lap. They needed a definite start date, and I couldn't promise one. I tried to keep my tone even, like I had made a rational choice. Inside, I felt like someone who had watched themselves throw away oxygen. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a long second. So you told them no, he said, more as a statement. I told them I understood if they had to move on, I answered. Which sounded even weaker now than it had on the call. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh but wasn't. You realize that was the safest offer you're likely to get. He glanced at me, eyes sharp but still soft around the edges. We built everything around that, around you taking it. I thought I could stay until things stabilized, I protested. I hated how defensive I sounded, like a kid with excuses. They scared me the whole episode, Mom acted like he was dying. I knew I was shifting blame even as I heard myself. Was the doctor saying that? He asked, eyebrows pulling together. I flinched because I remembered the calm explanation in that room. They said they wanted to watch him, that it was precaution. The word tasted wrong in my mouth now. So you gave up the job for precaution, he pressed. He did not raise his voice, which made it cut deeper somehow. Not because they refused to treat him without you there. He let the point sink in, then looked back out the windshield. I wanted to argue with his version of events. Tell him he did not understand the pressure in that hospital room. The way my mother used certain phrases felt like emotional blackmail. Instead, I heard myself say, it wasn't that simple. He turned toward me again and his eyes went softer. Maybe it wasn't, he admitted, giving me that much. But from where I sit, it keeps landing the same way. He tapped his chest lightly once, you choose them when it matters. That line hit harder than anything my family had thrown at me. Because deep down I knew he had a point I did not want. Every crisis, every sudden demand, I had always swung back home. Every time I swore it would be the last time. You're not being fair, I snapped, sharper than I intended. My voice shook and I pressed my nails into my palms. I rushed to the hospital, I stayed overnight, I'm tired. It sounded like I wanted a medal for basic care. He looked almost hurt for a flicker, then covered it. I'm not asking you to abandon your dad, he said quietly. I'm asking if there is any version where you don't abandon us. The word us landed heavier than any word on that job offer. I stared at the street over his shoulder so I would not cry. You knew my family came with baggage, I muttered. We had joked about it before, back when it felt fixable. Now it sounded more like a warning label he wished he had read twice. I knew they had issues, he replied, resting his head against the seat. I did not know they would get veto power over your whole life. He glanced toward the house where my mother still hovered behind curtains. I kept thinking we could work around them somehow. And we can, I insisted, grabbing onto that thin hope. We can wait a few months, see how his health is, try again. Even as I said it, I heard how vague that timeline was. Later, someday, maybe, all those non-words I used to comfort myself. He shook his head slowly, like he had already tried that route alone. I packed my car again today for you, he reminded me. Called the landlord, double-checked the deposit, rearranged my schedule. He gestured backward at the stacked boxes. This is me choosing us. I did not have a comeback for that. Because he was right, and it stung in a very specific way. His effort was physical, visible, something you could point at. Mine looked like a bunch of maybes stuck inside my throat. Your mom looked at me like I was kidnapping you last time, he added. He let out a short, humorless puff of air. I can live with people not liking me, I'm not fragile. He looked back at the house, but I can't build a life with someone who can be summoned away like that. Summoned, that was exactly what it felt like most days. One call, one crisis word, and my plans melted on command. I hated how accurately he had named it, and I hated myself for fitting it. I also hated that I was still trying to protect my parents in this conversation. What do you want me to do right now? I asked. My voice came out rough, like I had been yelling for hours. Walk back in there and announce I'm moving out tonight. Even the idea made my stomach flip. He looked at me for a long moment and did not answer. Finally, he reached into the console and pulled out a small key. The key to the place that would have been ours. He held it between his thumb and forefinger like it weighed something. I was going to hand you this on the way downtown, he said. He placed it in the cup holder instead, gentle but final. I thought we would stop by after the clerk's office and pick a wall for the couch. His mouth twitched. It was stupid, but I had this whole small scene in my head. Hearing about that tiny imagined moment hit me worse than any big speech. Because I could see it, like a snapshot from a life I missed. Us arguing about where to put things, squabbling and laughing. Normal problems, not these heavy moral puzzles with parents as referees. I reached for the key before I knew what I was doing. My fingers closed around the metal and held tight. I still want that, I whispered, hating how desperate I sounded. I just need more time. He closed his eyes briefly, like he was bracing. Time for what? He asked, opening them again. For your dad to fully recover, for your mom to approve, for the universe to clear your schedule. He shook his head, and there was sadness there, not anger. That's not fair, I repeated, but it felt weak now. He turned slightly in his seat and looked at me head on. I love you, he said, voice steady, no drama. And I'm starting to realize love is the only thing I'm bringing to this fight. That line knocked something loose in my chest. Because he was right again, and I wished he was. I had always assumed wanting something badly counted as effort. Turns out, it just made me good at suffering, not changing. I don't know how to do this without hurting them, I admitted. It came out in a rush, the closest thing to raw truth I gave him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands laced together. You might have to hurt someone to stop hurting yourself, he said. The awful part is, I knew that already. Not from therapy or self-help quotes, just from being alive. I just never wanted to be the person who actually did it. Being the villain in someone else's story terrified me more than staying stuck. He watched my face for a long moment, reading every flicker. Finally, he sat back and reached for the key again. I didn't fight him when he took it from my hand. That non-movement says more about me than any speech I could give you. He slid the key back into his pocket and looked away. I can't keep showing up with my world in the car, he said. Waiting to see if you can sneak away between crises. The word crises made me flinch because he was not exaggerating. So that's it, I asked, even though I already knew. My voice cracked on the last word and I hated it. He rested his forehead on the wheel for a second. I don't want it to be, he admitted, and that almost ruined me. He straightened and turned toward me one last time. If you ever actually pack for you, not for them, call me. He swallowed and his eyes shone, but he blinked it back. I just can't be the guy you text after the next emergency. There it was. The line that would replay in my head later, again and again. Because he knew me too well, right down to my lousy patterns. And he loved me enough to refuse to be swallowed by them. I opened the door because I did not trust myself to stay. The air outside felt thicker now, like walking through old regret. He gripped the wheel with both hands again, knuckles tight. I'm going to go unload this back at my place, he said quietly. I looked at the boxes stacked behind us through the open door. They looked ridiculous now, like a joke the universe had played. You're really leaving, I whispered, even though he was clearly about to. He gave one small nod, eyes still forward. I can't keep rearranging my life on hope, he said. Hope is nice, sure, but it is not a plan. He let the engine turn over, and the sound made my heart lurch. Take care of your family, he added, almost an afterthought. I stepped back from the car as it rolled out of the driveway. For a second I considered running after it, pounding on the trunk. Telling him I changed my mind, that I would grab my bag right now. My feet stayed planted on the concrete like they belonged there. He did not speed away, he just merged onto the street. Turned at the corner like any other person heading home. No big cinematic moment, no last look in the mirror. Just a quiet exit that hurt a lot more than drama would have. When his car vanished from view, I realized I had been holding my breath. I let it out in a shaky exhale and wiped my face with my sleeve. The front window creaked, and I caught movement behind the curtain. Of course, Mom had seen at least part of that. I walked back to the house on legs that felt unsteady. The doorknob turned easily under my hand, like nothing had changed. Inside, the smell of dinner and cleaning supplies wrapped around me. It was terrifying how normal the house felt after my life cracked. Mom stood near the counter, wiping it down in tight circles. She glanced up with that practiced neutral expression she used on Neighbors. Did he leave already? She asked, like she had not watched the whole thing. Her tone carried a hint of satisfaction she probably thought I missed. He had stuff to do, I answered, which was true in a twisted way. She nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something for her. Sometimes people show you where their priorities are, she remarked. She rinsed the sponge under running water with sharp movements. The irony almost knocked me over. Because from Eli's perspective, I had just done that exact thing. I wanted to scream that at her, shake the countertop, break something. Instead, I leaned against the wall and bit the inside of my cheek. Your father's asking for you, she added, flicking water off her fingers. He needs help getting downstairs for dinner. She smiled, soft and proud. He keeps saying how lucky we are you stayed. That last line cut deeper than anything Eli had said in the car. I nodded because what else was I supposed to do? I pushed myself away from the wall and headed for the stairs. Every step up felt like walking into a life I had not actually chosen. Even though, if we are honest, I had chosen it when I let that key go. I heard my mother start the story again before I reached the table. Her voice carried from the dining room, warm and proud and rehearsed. She got a big offer in another city, you know. Chairs scraped, silverware clicked, and my whole spine went tight. I stepped into the doorway, and everyone turned toward me. Mom lifted one hand like a game show host presenting a prize. And she turned it down to stay close to us, she finished. The cousins around the table made those impressed little noises people make on instinct. I sat at the empty chair she had clearly saved for me. The plate in front of me was already full, which said plenty. She chose stability over some corporate chaos, she added, tapping the table. If more kids were like her, families would be stronger. My neck burned so hot I thought someone could see it. I grabbed my glass and took a sip just to move. Nobody noticed my hands shaking, or if they did, they were polite. They nodded and smiled and bought the version on sale. My father leaned back in his seat and joined in. It was a good package, he said, patting his chest. But we needed her here when I had that episode. He glanced at me with soft eyes that felt like a trap. He went on, telling everyone how I had rushed to the hospital. How I had stayed the night in that stiff chair beside him. How many people would walk away from that kind of paycheck, he asked. He grinned at the table while I stared at the fork in my hand. An aunt I barely see more than twice a year chimed in. You did the right thing, sweetheart, money comes and goes. She reached across and squeezed my wrist like a blessing. Parents are only here for so long, you will never regret this. I almost laughed right then, which would have looked insane. Because regret was exactly the feeling buzzing behind my teeth. I bit down hard enough that my jaw ached just to stay quiet. You ever hold in words so long they feel like a physical object? Cousin Mark pointed his fork at me like a microphone. Man, I would have taken the cash and sent postcards, he joked. Everyone laughed except me, because I knew he meant it half serious. Mom tutted and shook her head, still smiling, still performing. She's not like that, she said, waving him off. She actually cares about family, she's not selfish. The word selfish landed in the middle of the table like a dare. Nobody realized it was aimed directly at my throat. I could have corrected the record right there if I wanted. I could have said the offer was gone before I turned it down. I could have mentioned the long call with HR and the word replaced. I could have admitted I never told them the full cost of that day. Instead, I smiled in that tight way that makes your cheeks hurt. It was a complicated situation I managed, which told them nothing. Mom jumped in before anyone could ask what complicated meant. Point is, she stayed, that's what matters, she said, closing the door. They switched topics after that because people eventually get hungry. The conversation drifted to holidays and office gossip and traffic. Someone asked if I planned to look for something new out of town. I felt my mother's attention snap back to me before I answered. For now she's staying near us, she answered, not bothering to check. I let her do it, which is the worst part. I let her speak like my scheduling assistant, not my parent. Silence can be a bigger lie than anything you say out loud. When the meal ended, everyone shuffled toward the living room. My father used the railing but moved easily, which twisted something inside me. He walked beside me down the hall, matching my pace. You know you made the right call, he murmured, low enough to be private. I looked at him and my chest did that awful squeeze again. About what? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Staying here, he replied, tapping his hand against his rib cage. Some jobs look shiny, but nothing beats knowing we can count on you. I nodded because arguing in that hallway would just wreck him. He genuinely believed this was all simple, love in a neat package. He did not see the pieces of my life still sitting in storage. He did not see the little metal ring hidden in my drawer. Later, when the dishes were stacked and everyone else had gone, I left. Mom stood in the doorway and tucked a loose strand behind her ear. You will text when you get home, right? She asked, voice lighter now. You know your dad sleeps better when he knows you're close. I live 10 minutes away, I reminded her, which changed nothing. She laughed and waved one hand like that detail was adorable. Still, she said, you never know what can happen. That last line hit like a repeat alarm I never turned off. Driving back to my place, the roads felt automatic. I could probably get from their driveway to my building half asleep. Same turns, same exit, same cracked billboard near the corner. That tiny radius is my whole world now, whether I admit it or not. I parked, cut the engine, and sat there for a moment. My phone lit up with her message before I even reached for it. You home yet? ? Bless her worried heart. I typed yes 3 letters and watched the conversation die on the screen. Inside, my apartment felt both full and hollow at the same time. Boxes from my almost move still lined one wall, labeled and untouched. I never unpacked them fully, which tells you everything about my mindset. I lived around them, the way you walk around a bruise you keep bumping. I kicked off my shoes and dropped my bag on a chair. The room was quiet, that dense kind of quiet that presses on your ears. I flicked on the TV without really caring what played. Noise helps when your own thoughts feel like they might eat you. My phone buzzed again, different tone, different app. A notification from social media flashed across the top, taunting. I almost ignored it, then saw his name in the preview bar. My stomach did that sudden flip, and yeah, I opened it. There he was in a photo, standing with some coworkers. They were in a lobby I did not recognize, holding cardboard cups. Caption said something about the new team crushing their first quarter. He looked tired but happy, which is a brutal combination to see. In the next picture, he stood outside an apartment building. He held up a set of keys with a crooked smile. Someone had tagged him and written, "Welcome to the neighborhood, man." I zoomed in like an idiot, trying to see inside through the door. You know that feeling when your chest feels too small for your organs? That was me on my couch, phone inches from my face. I kept waiting for some shot of a girl leaning on his shoulder. Nothing obvious in those pictures, which somehow hurt and comforted at once. My finger hovered over our old chat for a long time. Scrolling up showed our last messages, frozen at that awful weekend. No new bubbles, no new jokes, just the end of a thread. I started to type, erased it, then locked the screen. Instead of messaging him, I went into my bedroom. The drawer in the nightstand stuck for a second like it knew. I tugged it open and pushed past old receipts and tangled cords. My fingertips hit a small box in the back corner. I pulled it out and dropped onto the edge of the bed. The hinge creaked when I lifted the lid, louder than it should. The ring lay there, small and plain and unbearable. I picked it up and turned it between my fingers, slow. I slid it on my finger just to see. It still fit, which surprised me for some reason. My hand looked wrong and right at the same time. Like I was trying on someone else's life for half a minute. A memory flashed, quick and sharp, of him pressing it into my palm. His voice asking, "Are you sure?" quiet but hopeful. My mouth answering yes before my fear could grab the wheel. Back then, I really thought yes was enough to change everything. I stared at my hand and tried to imagine telling my parents. Telling them there had been more than a job on the line. Telling them they had interrupted an entire future, not just a commute. My throat tightened so fast I had to swallow twice to breathe. They do not know about this ring. They do not know there was paperwork already signed in another office. They do not know I was supposed to wake up in a different zip code. They honestly believe they saved me from a bad decision. I wish I could tell you I corrected them at some point. That one holiday I finally snapped and laid everything out. That I pushed back my chair and yelled across the table. None of that happened because I am very skilled at swallowing. What I do instead is small, almost invisible things. I look at job listings after midnight when the house is quiet. I bookmark remote positions in other states and close the tabs. I tell myself I am just gathering options, not actually planning. One afternoon, my inbox pinged with an unexpected message. It was from a recruiter I vaguely remembered from months earlier. She wrote that another client had seen my old resume. They wanted to talk about a role in a different city. My heart did a weird stumble when I read the subject line. I clicked it open and scanned the details twice. Good pay, relocation help, start date flexible, all the magic words. At the bottom, a simple line, "Let me know if you're still looking." I stared at that email long enough for my eyes to sting. It felt like the universe sliding a second envelope across the table. Not the same as the first, but close enough to hurt. I moved the cursor to the reply button and left it there. Before I could type, my phone rang on the dresser. Mom's name filled the screen with that familiar small jolt. I answered out of habit more than anything. Her voice came through fast, like always when she skipped greetings. "Your father's appointment tomorrow got moved earlier," she said. "We need you to drive, I have a conflict in the morning." She paused only long enough to breathe. "You can do it, right?" The way she asked made no held-back answer feel acceptable. I looked at the open laptop, the waiting email, the blinking cursor. I looked at the phone, pressed warm against my ear. "I think I can make that work," I heard myself say. There it was again, that automatic rearranging of my own life. After we hung up, I did something different though. I did not close the email, which is what old me would do. I did not delete it or file it in some safe folder. I left it open on the screen and stood up. The next day, I drove them to the clinic. In the waiting room, Mom struck up conversation with another woman. Within 5 minutes, she was telling the story of my sacrifice. I sat in the chair across from them listening. "She had a huge opportunity out of state," Mom said, animated. "She said no because she wanted to be close while we handled his health." The other woman clutched her chest and looked at me with shiny eyes. "You are a blessing," she said, and I almost choked on the word. Mom patted my knee like I was a well-behaved child. "Kids these days think about themselves first," she went on. "We raised her to put family ahead of everything." She sounded proud, like this was proof her parenting method worked. I kept my gaze on the floor until Dad's name was called. He stood up slower than before the scare, but steady enough. I helped him rise, one hand under his elbow. I felt like I was escorting both of us into a story I had not agreed to. Back home that night, I opened the laptop again. The email was still there, patient and neutral lines of text. I reread the part about flexible timing 3 times. Then I dragged the cursor to reply and clicked. My fingers floated above the keyboard, waiting for courage to arrive. I started with something small. "Hi, thanks for reaching out. I'm interested in hearing more." My hands shook, but I did not erase it this time. Before I hit send, my phone lit up beside the trackpad. Mom again, this time a text instead of a call. "Can you stop by tomorrow evening? We want to plan your father's birthday. Also, can you bring those forms from your work? We need help." I looked at her message and then at my draft email. 2 futures, one on each screen, both demanding attention. I added one more line into the message to the recruiter. I asked about remote options, anything that did not require immediate relocation. I pressed send before I could talk myself out of it. The whoosh sound felt louder than it should in that small room. It was not a flight booked or a lease signed. It was still more than closing the window and pretending I never saw it. Minutes later, another text popped up from Mom. "By the way, your uncle asked again why you turned down that job. I told him you realized family comes first." He was impressed. I stared at those words and felt my jaw clench. She had rewritten my whole history in one neat sentence. In her version, I was wise, selfless, clear-headed. In my version, I was scared, cornered, and very good at disappearing my own needs. Neither version has been spoken out loud in that house. Even now, no one under that roof knows about the ring. They do not know there is a box in my drawer holding another life. They do not know that when they brag about me, it feels like a bruise. They honestly think they protected me from my own bad judgment. My phone buzzed again while I was still staring at her text. This time, it was just one word from her. "Emergency." Old me would have called instantly, no questions asked. I did tap her name because reflexes are strong after years. Then I stopped with my thumb hovering over the green icon. I took a slow breath and walked to the nightstand. I opened the drawer and slid the ring onto my finger. Standing there, I watched the phone vibrate on the bedspread. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times while my heart pounded. For the first time since that day at the courthouse, I did not answer right away. I stood in the middle of my small room and reminded myself quietly that whatever this is, I still get a say.